And I will just parenthetically state, 40% of the tested waters, and I'm just going to say I would have to think, I would hope, the people doing the testing did in fact select the waters they thought in fact were the most polluted. I really doubt that that is actually just a random number. But I'm opposing this because it's very bad constitutional law. We use, what they're doing is using the Constitution to do what the legislature should do. So they're trying to make the Constitution actually legislate. And of course binding any future legislatures for 25 years. So no law that the legislature passes can ever bind a future legislature. And that's really the beauty of the system, because you've got 201 people there, and oftentimes the faces and the names change. And that's wonderful, because then new people get a chance to look at the problem and assess and analyze and pass bills that prioritize where our money is going to be spent as taxpayers. This avoids all that, and it puts these special interests at the front of the line before anything else, whether it's education or roads or health care. It's a very bad precedent. We've already heard Speaker Kelleher indicate that she's very excited that when this passes, it'll be a green light for many other sort of state policy areas to use the Constitution as a way to dedicate money. So we'd hate to see this happen on a bigger scale. And I think, for me, the thing it ignores is the fact that the private sector, this assumes that nobody's doing anything about water. We've had law after law after law in Minnesota passed, and we are in a paradigm shift. The value now is people value a clean environment, and so citizens on their own, with their own private money, through private organizations, are spending millions. The legislature doesn't even tally what wetlands are being preserved by private organizations such as the Nature Conservancy. So there's a certain amount of deceit in this whole campaign that I think citizens should be upset about, not to mention the bad method of collecting taxes and the bad method of distributing the money.
Mr. Poster, you mentioned there are some problems with the environment. This is a question for both of you. What are some specific environmental problems in Minnesota that need to be addressed?
Myself first?
Yes.
Well, you see it all over. The MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, is the state agency that's in charge of testing waters and seeing how they fare. And you're right, 40% are polluted. And to take one example, we often see levels of phosphorus, fecal chloroform, and algae in a lot of our shallow lakes around the state. That's a common problem, and we have real solutions on how to fix those. Unfortunately, those problems mean they're non-productive from a game standpoint. Birds aren't going to nest there. We've lost our waterfowl tradition, and they're also non-productive from a fish game habitat. They're not producing walleye, things like that, and they also not swimmable. That was the basic premise of the 1976 Federal Clean Water Act. We were trying to improve our waters to make them fishable and swimmable, and that's what we mean when they say they're polluted. So we can fix these. Yellow Medicine County, in Lake Murga, was a lake that the MPCA tested and failed to meet those basic water quality standards. Ducks Unlimited came up with a plan, and in conjunction with a grant from the DNR, went through a 3-year cycle trying to improve water quality in the lake. And they reduced phosphorus from 250 parts per billion, where the state threshold to be considered polluted is 90, and they brought it down to 25 parts per billion, a 90% reduction. They also improved water clarity from 6 inches to 30, a 5-fold increase. And what that did is it got rid of some of the invasive species. It let the native plants grow, which also then made it hospitable for ducks and other waterfowl. So these are examples of where there were problems. They tested. They came up with a comprehensive plan to fix it. They put it into action, and today it's a much cleaner lake and productive. It also helps the downwater lakes, because the water is cleaner that's going into it. So there's some examples of we can be productive. We can use this money well, but it isn't about new regulation. It's about funding to fix them.
Mrs. Runbeck?
I note, and I think everyone should become aware of a couple of the interesting features of the act that's being funded, and that is the term fishable and swimmable. I think the ads even use that term. We want to make sure our lakes are swimmable and fishable. And I can't think of too many that aren't swimmable. I think what we're seeing is a sort of a changing of the goalposts, and it used to be, and we used to measure pollution in terms of parts per million, and as you noted, Charlie mentioned now we're looking at measuring it in parts per billion. So the measurements are getting more fine-tuned. I mean, this is becoming, I think, here's where we really want the citizens to be involved in determining where resources are most needed. Let us clean up the truly polluted lakes and streams and rivers. I mean, no one's going to object. In fact, you may have read an article in the Pioneer or Star Tribune last February which actually said that in 100 small rural communities in Minnesota, they're still actually pushing sewage directly from a pipe into their nearby streams and rivers. And perhaps, but this, that may be a good use of it. I don't hear too much about that that's how we're going to spend money. It does seem as though the federal government has said, we're not going to bother with point source pollution, the stuff that comes out of the pipe that is direct sewage into our streams and lakes. We're going to now go after the people that are responsible for non-point source pollution. And even though the feds are not wanting to use that term because it's very controversial, because it literally means anything that human activity results in, whether it be pet hair, lawn care runoff, roof runoff, parking lots, all of that is responsible for non-point source pollution. And here we're kind of shifting paths, rather dramatically and saying, we still got sewage running into some streams and rivers in outstate Minnesota. Let's find out where the money is being spent, okay? I mean, this is what this concern, I think, is all about. If you read the language in the amendment, it is incredibly generic and gives you no clue. What you have to understand is that the language here is what is determinative. Now, there is underlying legislation that, yes, indeed, says we're going to spend two-thirds of it essentially for the out-of-doors, and we're going to spend one-third for arts and cultural heritage. But that's in the law. The law can be changed, and perhaps will be. If you've got the Constitution saying this, without limits, effectively there's no limit to how much money we're going to spend for these problems, then whatever your law says about how it'll be spent probably doesn't mean very much, especially over 25 years. So, yes, there are problems. Let's get a much better handle on it. Let's not just send money away for 25 years, because we can't reverse this for another 25 years unless somebody else has the chutzpah and the money and all to actually put forth an amendment. And by the way, the proponents have spent $3.5 million to get this passed. The opponents have spent about $150,000. So it's truly David and Goliath. But some people really want this, and all I'm saying is we need to ask questions every year at the legislature. Let's find a way to prioritize what's truly needed and what just sounds nice.
Would you like to address the issue of the non-point source pollution?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the Minnesota Association of Small Cities has endorsed this exactly for that point. We still do have 60 to 80,000 straight pipes where there is no water treatment plant, and they endorse this because they think that some of these funds could be used to help with the water treatment plants in outstate Minnesota.